fuck is up, man?
Hey, thanks for having me here.
I'm excited to chat, dude. We've spent a good amount of time connecting over the years, and I love what you've done with these BFR bands. You were the first person to turn me on to this type of training. And for the people that aren't familiar, what is a BFR band?
Yeah, BFR stands for blood flow restriction. And they're basically, it sounds kind of scary and it sounds counterintuitive. And I know we're going to dive into more about BFR, but essentially it's a band that provides comfortable compression to the upper arms or the upper legs that allows you to gain muscle and strength while lifting with light weight. And the studies have shown that it gets similar results to what you would see if you lifted with moderate to heavy weight without the bands.
And why is that a good thing?
Well, for a lot of people, let's say, maybe you don't want to lift heavy, or your joints have taken a toll from lifting heavy, or maybe you have certain exercises where you can't really lift heavy anymore. The BFR bands can be really, really useful for that to help you recover faster or build muscle and strength better. But it also works as a great adjunct. They found that through three primary mechanisms, through mechanical tension, cellular swelling, and metabolic accumulation, the bands actually help you grow faster. So if you're doing traditional training, let's say you're doing your typical moderate to heavy workout, at the end of that workout, you can throw in a couple exercises with the bands where you're doing high repetitions. You're basically training to failure, doing high reps, and you're doing 3 to 4 sets or more. And what it will do is it'll basically just amplify the results than what you would see if you didn't do BFR at the end of your workout.
Yeah. And for those of you guys listening that are training and looking to get more out of your workouts, there's going to be a lot of gems that we're going to discuss here. And this is a topic where when I first posted about BFR bands, you do get a lot of people who are immediately concerned about restricting blood flow in any capacity, because most of us know how important that is, but it's truly on the leading edge. I did a workout last week at this place called Barwis, which is like a high performance training center here in Deerfield, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And it's where Robbie Lawler, who's like the former welterweight champion of the UFC, it's where he trains. And he was actually there when we went in. And the workout that we did started out, they hooked us up with the BFR bands. And, they had some of the ones that you pump some air into. What do they call those? Katsus or something like that. They pumped some air into them. And then they had us do an athletic based workout. My legs were smoked for days, it was the good type of workout feeling that you get after you've pushed yourself. But it was something I had not experienced in like a leg day in a long time. And we were using mostly body weight and, some sled runs and things like that. So the people that are at the leading edge of high performance, like Robbie Lawler, UFC champions, NFL players, baseball players, they're using this technology, and the facilities that they go to have adopted it. So, fear not, my friends.
Yeah, in terms of safety, what I always refer to, if you look at the research is actually really interesting, because what they found is not only has the research shown that BFR training has shown that it's just as safe, if not safer, than traditional training, because you're lifting with very, very light weight, but also in terms of blood clots. A lot of people ask, oh, well, you're putting this band around your arm and you're pooling the blood in a way because you're accumulating that blood flow by slowing the venous blood flow. And what they found is that not only did they not see any issues with blood clotting, they actually found the opposite. They found an increase in what's called fibrinolytic activity. And what that means is that it basically actually improves clotting rather than making it worse. So they found the opposite to be true with BFR training. And then the other thing that people think about is in terms of blood pressure. What's it doing to your pressure? And what they found is that with BFR, typically with blood flow restriction, you're raising systolic pressures to around 160 millimeters of mercury. So when you're doing BFR training, your systolic pressure is going to go maybe to around 160. With traditional weight training, especially if you're lifting heavy, your systolic pressure is going up to about 400 millimeters of mercury. A lot of people don't know that. So with traditional training, you're at much greater risk of putting more stress and more load on your blood pressure with heavyweight training than you are with lightweight BFR training.
All right. So you covered a lot of cool stuff there. First, so one of the main mechanisms that it works is by slowing venous blood flow, which is, correct me if I'm talking out my ass here, but slowing the rate of blood flow returning to the heart, but it doesn't affect arterial blood flow?
Not directly. So, of course, you have a loop of blood flow, right? You have blood flow going into the arms from the arteries, and you have blood flows going out of the arms to the veins. And so when you're wearing the bands correctly, the goal is to not impede the arterial blood flow in, because arteries are bringing a lot of these good organic compounds, and, you don't want to impede the blood flow in. What you're trying to do is you're trying to put pressure. Typically, the studies that were done to what's called perceived tightness. So whatever you felt on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100%, and you want them to feel like 70% tightness. And at 70% tightness, you're allowing as long as the band has an optimal width, which we've tried to make our bands have the optimal width, that you're putting pressure on the veins. So that way you're still allowing the blood flow in, not putting pressure on the artery, and you're just slowing the blood flow out. And that's how you help with the cellular swelling, the metabolic accumulation, et cetera.
Yeah, that transitions well into that. The three main mechanisms of action: mechanical tension. So is that like time under tension, like actually the load that you're putting on the muscle?
Partly, mostly when I refer to mechanical tension, I'm talking about the actual tension of the band. So
Okay,
just by having the band on the arm or the leg, it's going to help improve strength.
Nice. Okay, and then cellular swelling. So that's occurring as a result of slowed venous blood flow.
Yeah, what's happening is that because you're reducing the energy supply, if you think about what happens during traditional training, you're using more of those aerobic type 1 slow twitch fibers, what we call the marathoner's fibers. Nobody wants to look like the marathoner. They want to look like the sprinter. They want to be muscular. They want to be athletic. They want to be lean. And, the type 1 fibers are what kick in first. Type 2 fibers kick in second traditionally, unless you're lifting explosively or with very, very heavy weight. And so with BFR, because you're reducing that aerobic energy supply, it kicks in those type 2 fibers. And we consider this a biohack, which I know you like, because you're not lifting with heavy weight. So it's a workaround. So instead of having to lift heavy weight to get that type 2 activation immediately, you're getting it with lightweight.
Yeah. And so part 3 is metabolic accumulation. But one of the things that you just mentioned there is important. Like a lot of people I see with, they've got compromised biomechanics or different trigger points and things that are preventing their muscles from firing. And at a certain point, as let's say someone that wants to like build mass, they know that they need to get stronger. And to do that, they need to increase their load and that the amount of work that the muscle's performing. But at some point, it's like there's a tipping point where the likelihood of injury is high and often occurs. Yeah. And then you're out for long periods of time. Mm-hmm. And what this cellular swelling effect seems like it can do is get you a lot of that type 2 muscle activation that would otherwise require, let's say, heavy deadlifts, heavy barbell squats on a long enough timeline, expose you to potential injuries, but you're able to do it in a way that's more safe and still gets the hypertrophy that helps you, look good with your shirt off.
Yeah. And I also think that what happens a lot of the time for most people, if you look at a lot of the, kind of the fitness professional certifications out there, a lot of them talk about periodization. They talk about, some of them show like a pyramid. You have to have a foundation. And most people jump right in the middle. When most people start a program, they do 3 sets of 10 or, 5 sets of 8 or 10 sets of 10, whatever it may be. They're going heavy. They're doing heavy weight. When you're doing that right off the bat and you're doing that all the time, you're primarily putting you're requiring a lot from the muscle, and you're putting a lot of stress on the joint matrix. So the ligaments and tendons are going to have a hard time adapting as fast as maybe the muscle can.
They just don't biologically.
Exactly. They're not going to. So unless you're willing to really put in that, kind of boring, diligent work to do, much higher reps with very, very lightweight without the bands, which may not feel as good because you're not going to get as much of a pump as you might with BFR bands. Unless you're willing to do that kind of work and put in that foundation, your joints are most likely going to end up suffering when you start going heavy. They're going to end up, especially for certain exercises, your back, your knee, your elbows, they're going to end up getting torqued, and they're going to take a toll. And then it only gets worse over time because, like you said, what happens is with heavy weight, our egos get the best of us. Our range of motion slowly decreases because, we're trying to maintain that heavy weight. We don't want to go backwards. If we do a heavy weight one week, we want to try to do at least that much the next week, when sometimes, depending on, your stress level and that stress load, you might need to be taking a step back. Most of the time we don't. And then what happens is we end up sacrificing our form. We end up doing a smaller range of motion. And a small range of motion, in my opinion, is okay. I have no issues with partial range of motion. It's just that if you're not doing anything proactively to recover from that partial range of motion by retraining the brain on how much range of motion you actually have, then you're going to kind of reduce that range of motion over time. You're going to increase pain signals potentially and pain output. You're going to, potentially reduce your mobility and flexibility and have hypertonicity. So BFR bands I view as a really good tool also to be used to, get you to feel comfortable with full range of motion. At the end of your workout, you could think of it as like, okay, I'm going to undo all the partial reps that I might have done, and I can do that full range and still feel good and still get a good muscle burn and still get a good pump.
Yeah, back in the day when I was still playing soccer, I had a membership at like Bally's Total Fitness in my hometown, and I had grandiose dreams of playing college soccer, and I also was like reading Men's Health magazine from like age 10 on, and a lot of and they were advocates of using partial reps to allow you to do heavier weight. Well, the problem is, going back to some of that biomechanical stuff, or just like poor form with certain exercises. As a sophomore, junior in high school, I didn't really know what I was doing that well, even though I'd been lifting for a few years. When it came to squats and especially heavy squats, my form became compromised almost immediately. You get some rounding of the back, maybe your knees buckle in rather than pushing out. Things that, unless you have a lot of experience training, can be problematic as you increase your load. And these aren't things that people think about. So as soon as I started lifting heavy, it was only a matter of weeks until my quad tendon was acting up. And then that translated to problems on the soccer field because I was doing heavier partial reps with shitty form, and probably some biomechanical things that further contributed to that issue. And I like that the bands protect you from that. I mean, it's a biohack that I wish I had at that time. Tell me about metabolic accumulation. What's going on there?
Yeah. So if you think about when you're getting a good burn, what that burn is that lactate accumulation, and also hydrogen ions are coming in. So when you're feeling that burn, there's a chemical change, but there's also an electrical charge change. You have a lot of these, positive hydrogen ions coming in that are, making you feel a burning sensation in whatever muscle group you're working. And this happens whenever you're, primarily doing some type of anaerobic activity. That's usually when you'll notice it, when you're doing some kind of a cycling sprint, or you're doing, some type of, maybe you're doing curls and you're doing 21s or whatever it may be, and you're feeling this crazy burn because there's a lot of time.
Explain 21s for the people.
Oh, yeah. 21s is just an example of when you're talking about partial range, you'll do maybe 7 reps in each range of motion. You'll do 7 at the bottom range of motion, 7 curls in the top range from the halfway up, and then 7 full. And you do them all in a row consecutively. And I think more by virtue of just the time under tension, in addition to the fact that, you're able to handle more load because you're not doing full reps for all 21 reps, that you feel a burning sensation quickly. You get that lactate accumulation, and that lactate triggers that burn. And with BFR, you're accumulating the lactate to a faster and higher degree because by virtue of having these bands slowing the release of a lot of these nutrients. And so this is good for several reasons. For someone who wants to grow in size, for hypertrophy, this is good because this is going to have a lot of signaling to release growth hormone, IGF-1. It's going to help, they found in studies, it's helped inhibit myostatin, which is something that, prevents muscle growth. It helps increase something called mTOR, which is a pathway for, increasing muscle growth and muscle protein.
It increases mTOR?
Yeah, increases mTOR.
Cool.
And so they're finding that, the lactate accumulation, it can be really powerful to help signal a lot of these pathways for growth, but also you're getting a bolus of nutrient-rich blood that are saturating these joints. Like, let's say you have tennis elbow, maybe you've done a lot of skull crushers and tricep pushdowns over the years with heavy weight, and your elbows and shoulders are aching. This can be useful because you're now saturating the joints, the joint matrix that we talked about earlier, that's probably not getting good stimulus and good nutrients. You're saturating it now with a bolus of nutrient-rich blood. And I think that's partly in why that, it's so powerful as a recovery tool and to help enhance that foundation before you do go heavy again. I often find for myself when I use BFR, especially for some of my exercises, like maybe a shoulder press where I might be weakest on, an overhead press. If I take a step back and just do BFR for a little bit with very lightweight, I think by virtue of that mechanical tension, I'm enhancing my brain awareness of how to move, reducing that threat, as well as enhancing and strengthening the joint matrix. When I do go heavy again, I immediately notice I'm able to go heavier. I'm able to go much heavier than I did before. So for a lot of your weaker lifts where, you might be held back, BFR could be a forward.
Say that last part one more time. You said, so for some of your heavier lifts, BFR could be a good way to.
Oh, for a lot of your lifts where you might be held back or you feel stuck, maybe you have a certain exercise like a squat or overhead shoulder press. A lot of these common exercises where people typically they plateau and they can't, whether it be from pain or injury or just weakness, they get stuck and they just can't seem to break through. Then if you're not seeing progress with your strength on that exercise, then BFR, I can almost guarantee you're going to see a lot of results in terms of getting through to that next level of strength and muscle size.
Yeah, for sure. And so you've had a few versions of your BFR bands. The first ones you sent me had sort of like a plastic clip on them, and I immediately threw those. I threw them on my legs. I threw them on my arms, and I'm walking around the gym at the Chicago high rise that I used to live at, which is like always packed with people. And I'm just like, everyone's looking at me like trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing, because no one had seen these. and realizing afterwards that I don't need to wear both of them at the same time. I could like put on the arm pair, and those go kind of like right around the shoulder, right, just above the bicep.
Exactly. Right where the bicep and the deltoid meet. One of the big misconceptions too that I hear is some people are like, so we have a variety of bands. And the main reason we have such a wide variety is because we want to also cater to people's preferences. So our primary bands that I always try to push, because I believe they have the optimal width for most people, is our Pro X bands for upper body, which are 2 inches wide, and our quad wrap BFR bands for lower body, which are 3 inches wide. Those will, for the majority of people, those are going to help you achieve optimal pressure for upper or lower body. And they're also going to be very quick and easy to put on. The Pro X bands, especially because the Pro X has a buckle that's designed for you to just pull to tighten it. So it's designed for one-handed operation by yourself. And they both have numbers on them. So they both have a marking system so you can track your pressure and train with symmetry and consistency. So they're both very useful for that. And so some people will say, oh, well, I can't get this to, really fit well between my deltoid and my bicep, where the bicep and deltoid meet. And you actually don't need, a big misconception is you don't actually need them to fit exactly in between. It doesn't need to be a 1 inch band, or 1.5 inch band to fit exactly in there. Sometimes people want that for preference, for comfort. Maybe, the buckle or, the band itself maybe doesn't feel as comfortable as they want it to feel, depending on their body density and their muscle shape and that sort of thing. Yeah. But
how bad do you want it?
Yeah, it just depends on the person. And I always tell people you have to understand that, everyone has a different body density, body shape, muscle shape. So everyone's going to be a little bit different. So if one band doesn't work out, we have a great variety. So I guarantee we have something for everybody. But yeah, we have the Pro X bands, which I'm not sure if you have those or not. They're red and black.
Yes.
Those are the ones that are the easiest for
I like those way more. Like version 1, I liked. It was good. Mm-hmm. I smoked my arms, when I was doing an arm workout. But the new ones are so much easier with being able to do it with one arm. And I love them.
Yeah, we enhanced it, even more now. We have, in addition, we actually, I think, increased the numbers. So now instead of going 1 to 10, it goes 1 to 12. So people who have larger arms can get more use out of it. We added adjustable Velcro. So we had an elastic loop on there that moves, so that way you can tuck the slack. But I've personally found that tucking the slack through that loop with one hand can be a little bit tricky to do by yourself sometimes. So I actually made it so there's actually Velcro on the loop. So you can actually adjust the loop to wherever you want. And you can actually the end of the band now has Velcro on it too, so that it can just, attach onto there and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to fumble with tucking it or anything like that if you don't want to.
Nice, man. I like it. Just improving with each iteration.
Yeah. Every iteration, trying to get a little bit better.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that workout at Barwis in Deerfield, and it reinvigorated my excitement for these things, especially the way I felt the next few days. So who's using the BFR bands and how are they using them? Like, where are you seeing a lot of application for this biohack?
Yeah, so the majority of people I see a lot of guys using our Pro X bands and our quad wraps for their upper body and lower body. They're using them to increase size and strength. But I'm also seeing a lot of guys of all age ranges, 35 and up, that are using them to maybe recover from a nagging injury. They're using it because they're burnt out on heavy lifting all the time. They're using it to break through their plateaus. I'm seeing a whole wide variety. I do also even see some people, men and women that are older, that maybe are having issues with maybe muscle atrophy, that are using this to help kind of prevent or slow down or reverse muscle atrophy without having to lift heavy weight. Maybe they can't, based on their circumstance, lift heavy. So this allows them and gives them some freedom. It's also really valuable, I find, for a lot of people who are very busy. Maybe you can't get to the gym for an hour every single day. This gives you more options, because all you really need are some bands and maybe some light dumbbells at home, and you could do a full workout and essentially get a similar, physiological response as if you went to the gym and trained with heavy weight. Obviously, like I said, you're going to get the best results if you're doing both. If you're doing a periodized program that consists of some traditional training and some BFR, you're going to get the best results. But if you skip the gym and do nothing, that's obviously going to be worse than if you accelerate your results by using BFR with lightweight. So I find that to be valuable. And then also we have a large population of practitioners, fitness professionals, doctors, physical therapists. A lot of them are using our Pro X bands and our quad wraps. But we also now recently released our signature series BFR bands, which you can see on BFR Shop under the BFR bands category. The signature series is hand pumpable, like what you're talking about. And we also added that same number system. There's numbers on the band, so that way you can track your base pressure. So that way that, okay, my arm, I've tightened this band to a base pressure of maybe number two, and then you can actually use the hand pump, which is a blood pressure pump. It's a sphygmomanometer and displays pressure in millimeters of mercury. You can pump it up, and then it has a one-way valve, so you can disconnect it, and that way you have nothing hooked up to you while you're working out. And then when you're done, you can, so it's all hand pumpable. We actually designed the, I don't have it with me, but this is a similar band.
I may be picking up a pair of those. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, we made them affordable, because a lot of the stuff that was out there, they're expensive devices that were thousands of dollars, and these are about $249 for a total set. It comes with the hand pump, armbands, 2-inch armbands, 3-inch leg bands, and yeah, like I said, it has the numbers on it. It's hand pumpable, one-way valve, and we've also designed a unique type of slider, where there's a metal slider on there, but we've actually set the slider back, so that way it doesn't pinch the skin. So you can see here, the slider is set back so there's no gap. So that's just the same kind of thing we've done with this example here, is what we've done with the signature series. And that helps prevent pinching, and also helps provide that same 360 degrees of pressure, the symmetrical pressure.
Yeah, for those of you guys that are listening to this and don't have the video, kind of describe, Kusha, what the BFR bands look like for someone who wants a little bit of help visualizing.
Yeah, so the bands I was just referring to, we have a variety of bands, and some of them, our primary ones, have a small buckle, and the buckle is designed to work like a tourniquet. In the example of the Pro X BFR bands, that's our most popular one. It works like a tourniquet, where you can literally just pull the band when you're wearing it on your arm, and it'll tighten and it'll hold in place. And when you're done, it's spring loaded. So when you're done, you lift the lever, it loosens, you can release it and take it off quickly as well. The one I was just showing is, we have, for some people who don't like the buckle, maybe they are averse to the buckle, it doesn't feel good to them, whatever it may be, for their personal preference, we've designed, one that has a metal slider. So we have a series of bands that have metal sliders. And the ones I was just referring to is the one that mostly our professionals use, our signature series. And those use a metal slider. But with a metal slider, there's still sometimes a little bit of a gap. So what we've tried to do with the metal slider is we've redesigned it now so that it's set back a little bit. And we've actually designed it so that way, you have it basically, the band meets the band. And so you don't have, band gap with the metal slider and band. Now it's just band going straight to band. And you have like basically a cushion there in between. So that way you have that 360 degrees of pressure.
Yeah. And like, it's important to keep in mind that you're using these to get you into a state of discomfort faster, because that discomfort is where you're experiencing everything we talked about earlier with cellular swelling and metabolic accumulation. And no, it's not going to feel like, amazing, but that means it's working. So yeah, you don't put them on expecting like, it's going to work. They do their job.
Yeah, BFR is not easy. It still requires effort. Any change in life in general with anything always is going to require effort. Anyone who tries to convince you that, oh, you can do this instead of that and you'll get the same results with zero effort, they're lying to you. That's snake oil. There's no way. You still have to put in the effort to get results. And like you said, it's going to burn. It's still going to have some level of discomfort. Any change is going to have discomfort to break through to that next level, to break out of that cocoon and bring out that beast. You're going to have to, break through some discomfort to get there, but it's different. It's a different feeling than, and I like it personally because there's less of a psychological thing around it. When I have to go to the gym and do a leg day and I have my typical routine of doing heavy squats, I have to get psychologically prepped for that because it's a mental threat to put yourself under a heavy bar and to do that load, especially if you've ever had an injury before. You're always afraid, like, oh, am I going to mess it up again? Am I going to hurt myself again? I have to do this perfectly today. And it's not like our lives revolve around the gym. Everyone has a normal life outside of their goals and fitness goals. So you have all these other stressors clouding that as well. And I like BFR because it takes that element out of it. There's no psychological stress around lifting lightweight. It's no one's like, oh my God, I'm lifting lightweight, I'm scared.
And there's a huge component of, you talked about people that are dealing with, let's say cachexia, like someone who's dealing with cancer, but still wants to maintain some of their muscle mass, or people who have health issues. Really any chronic and degenerative condition, or just an infection like Lyme or something like that. Like when I had Lyme, I could not push myself. I could pretty much only do yoga or like very, very slow body weight exercises, because some of the heavy explosive stuff, especially CrossFit, and those style workouts can be incredibly demanding on the central nervous system. And if you're in a compromised state of health, and then you add on to that explosive training with heavy weight, things that further stress the CNS, your body is less likely to recover. But you can get a lot of those benefits using an implement like the BFR Bands, training with at a slower pace with a lighter weight, and still have those adaptations that result in more muscle mass or less muscle loss, whatever you're going for.
Yeah, exactly. It's really valuable. I mean, it emerged initially with patients in the hospital setting. Like I want to say 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was used by a doctor who was using it with patients that really couldn't do a whole lot. It wasn't for them to become a bodybuilder. It was for them to, like you said, prevent muscle atrophy. And when he realized that it was helping them with hypertrophy, not only, slowing their atrophy, but actually helping them gain and maintain their muscle, that's when all the research started emerging. After that, it was a snowball, because they were like, wow, something's magical here, because, this BFR training is not only helping them slow this down, but it's actually helping them get better results than we particularly thought it would do. So there's still a lot of research, I think, that needs to be done. But I mean, there's hundreds of studies to date, over 25 years of research on the topic, a lot of research on practical BFR training. So like you talked about earlier, these devices like the Katsu device and all that. But the primary research that I'm talking about is practical BFR training, where they're using like wrist wraps and knee wraps and that sort of thing. And they found very interesting results just using practical methods, using knee wraps or wrist wraps. And so, you don't necessarily have to spend a fortune to be able to get the results of BFR. You could use something like knee wraps if you wanted to. We even offer knee wraps on our website for people who just, want to be able to have some knee wraps they can use as knee wraps, and also use them for, their BFR training on their upper legs when they want to as well.
Okay. So why would someone want to use knee wraps as opposed to, like, when I've used yours, I use them up just below my glutes?
Yeah. So knee wraps, people will use, when I say they're using knee wraps, they're still using them in the same position. They're still putting them below the glutes at the top of the thighs. They're just using knee wraps because they're cheap. Knee wraps, maybe will be under $20, under $30, whatever it may be, or less, depending on what you're getting. And the problem with knee wraps is that without the marking system on them, and without some of the enhancements like we have on our quad wraps, like we have a thicker material we use, we have some finger loops we put on there so you can hold it in place so it doesn't just slip out of your hand. And we have a longer portion of Velcro so it fits more people. But without some of those enhancements, you're not going to have some of those benefits, like being able to track your pressure. So you won't be as symmetrical. And also, it's almost impossible to put knee wraps on your arm by yourself. In a study, it's easy because you have somebody to put it on for you. But if you're, in a practical setting, if you're going to the gym, to try to wrap an 80-inch knee wrap around your bicep, by yourself is very, very hard to get it started and get it going. It's frustrating. Same with wrist wrap, same thing. So that's actually why we created the BFR bands. 5-6 years ago now, we created it for that reason. We wanted to make it much easier. It was really out of our own frustration that I was like, God, it shouldn't be this hard to be able to do this. I shouldn't have to have a workout partner to be able to, do BFR training.
Yeah.
So that's where it all emerged.
Yeah, I'm traveling for 15 days. This is going to be like the longest I've traveled for work in a while. And some of the hotel gyms, or even if you're camping, like there's not always access to the equipment that you need for resistance training. But what I like is I can bring the BFR bands do body weight training, and still maintain some of the hypertrophy and or at least prevent any muscle loss during that period without resistance, without having a full gym. And
and you could even get a set of elastic bands, some resistance bands.
Oh yeah.
That have handles. So you could take that. That's what I do. And that takes up literally the tiniest amount of space.
That's what I'll do. I'm gonna bring that too.
Space.
Yeah.
And take that with your bands, and you got a gym with you. And like I said, obviously it's not going to be the same you're not going to get the same results. I don't want anyone to think like, oh my gosh, this is BS. You're proposing you're going to get the same results as going heavy and training like Arnold in the gym. No, if you do both, you're going to get the best results.
Yeah.
If you have no other options, then this is a great option than doing just body weight training with no weight and no bands.
What's sort of the minimum effective dose on how to use this? Because I also want to make it a more regular part of my weekly training regimen. So for someone who wants more muscle, less muscle loss, how would you apply the BFR bands?
Yeah, I would be doing it 3 days a week. You can either use it at the end of your workouts. So let's say at the end of your normal workout, you maybe will do 2 exercises, and you'll do like typical protocols, like 4 sets where you're doing 30 reps on the first set and then 15 reps on the next 3 sets. And you'll do 30, 15, 15, 15 for those 2 exercises with very short rest in between. So maybe it's 30 seconds of rest in between. You're trying to really get that burn going, get a pump. So you can use it as a finisher 3 days a week, or you could use it on your off days 3 days a week. So maybe you're doing 4 or 5 days a week of traditional training, and the days in between you're doing BFR training.
Nice. Awesome. And we're hooking up our Biohacking Secret Show listeners with 20% off, right?
Correct. Yep.
You guys can go to bestbiohacks.com/BFR shop. So you can remember that. I mean, all of our stuff's bestbiohacks.com, and then BFR blood flow restriction shop. And you enter just discount code biohacks and you get 20% off. And even if you forget that URL, Kusha is going to set it up where you go to his website, which is what, bfrshop.com.
Yeah, they could just go straight to bfrshop.com, and as long as they, use that coupon code biohacks, they're going to get 20% off.
Awesome, man. I'm pumped, and I'm actually looking forward to applying this as I travel for 15 days, bringing some BFR bands and some resistance bands, and then throwing in some outdoor workouts and stuff like that. It's I'll report back to everybody.
Yeah, one other thing I was just going to mention is that you could also, a lot of people like to use it for their cardio. If you're doing some boring cardio that's not really getting results, you can amplify the results of your cardio by putting this on the upper legs and just going for a walk. We had a study done with our bands where they found that when they wore it on the upper legs, they took these guys who were fit military trained guys. So these weren't, some newbies, some beginners who were going to see results from anything new. These were guys who were already adapted to strength training, and they just had them walk. You have to imagine these guys are used to doing aggressive, high intensity activity. And they just said, okay, you're going to walk for 20 minutes, 3 days a week for 6 weeks. At the end of the study, all of them saw significant results with regard to increase in VO2 max, decrease in 1.5 mile run time. So they got faster, improved their performance, and it increased their leg size and leg strength. So
badass.
Yeah,
I got
really,
consulting call next. I'm going to strap those on and do it outside, walking with my selfie stick, talking on the phone with my BFR bands around my thighs. Kusha, this is awesome, man. Thank you for hanging out. We'll have to have you back again soon and dig more into some of the emerging scientific literature on BFR bands. But I love what you're doing, man, the iterations that you're putting out. And And I think you guys would dig the BFR bands too, if this sounds like something you want to check out. Thanks, brother. Appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.